Many years ago, there was a couple named Fred and Laura Haight who lived in Iowa, and I don't know whether they started out their life on the Glen Alpine home, but by the time I knew, and the time they had many of their children, they were living in Glen Alpine. Very nice little place. They had 10 boys altogether, but 2 of them died in infancy. 8 of them lived to be grown men. They named the first one Herbert, and when they got down to ready for the 7th boy, they realized that if they took the first initial of each one of the brothers, it spelled H-E-R-B-E-R. So they put an ad in the paper for names beginning with T. And the one they picked was Trevor, T-R-E-V-O-R, who happened to be my dad. And so the name first initial did spell Herbert. The next one that lived was called Dwight. The 2 other boys, I am not sure, that died in infancy, I don't know what their names were. Of the 8 boys, eventually 7 moved to Montana to homestead. The only one who did not go to Montana was my dad, Trevor. 5 of the boys stayed in Montana. 1, Elgar, came back to Iowa to farm, and 1, Burl, went to California to work. What else would you like to know? And we started having reunions. The first cousins started having reunions in 1947. Previous to that, we had a round-robin letter where one person would write a letter, send it to the next cousin, who would add a letter, and then send it to the next one. And that went on for a couple of years, but finally got lost. But then they decided to have a reunion. And as I say, the first one was in South Dakota in 1947, and we decided to have them every 3 years in the future. And we have not missed a year that we were scheduled to have a reunion, and this, I think, is the 20th one. And they've been all over the United States. One in Washington, one in California, one in Massachusetts, one in North Carolina, and a lot of the states in between. And it's a great time to go and meet your relatives, become acquainted with them.
George is behind you. Maybe George has a good story.
George? I know you do. George, you like good stories.
Do you have even not good
Yes.
story?
Yeah, just
Any story.
some memory of a reunion or
What was your first reunion?
This story, I've already told this story about Lyle. That's the one I remember the most.
the grain truck.
Which one?
But
With
it
the
wasn't
grain
on
truck.
tape, was it?
Oh.
They didn't
I
get
don't
it on
know
tape.
if it's on tape or
No, I
not.
don't think
Is
so.
it on
If it
tape?
is, you can edit it out.
Well, I hate to meet with my mouth full, but there's right. There's so much good food around here, and the weather is so warm. The fruit is good to eat. The story I remember was being down on the farm in Washington State, and it was the days when we were still playing jokes on Lyle. And the question was, what kind of jokes can we play this time? Here we are on a farm in the middle of the Palouse, which is some of the richest wheat country in the United States, and it produces 95% of the lentils in the United States. But what do you do when you're stuck in the middle of no place to play a joke on Lyle? And so, after much planning, the cousins, who, of course I wasn't involved in this, because I'm only an outlaw, I'm not one of the in-laws. But anyway, the in-laws got together and decided to take his Volkswagen and see if they could put it in the back of one of the grain trucks. So this is a truck that holds about 200 bushels, and the sides were on the truck and everything. But to do that, they had to lift it up, and I guess we rolled it across the parking lot, and then we put a ramp up to the grain truck. We may have tipped the bed a little bit to make the ramp less steep, and then we got behind it and pushed it, and it only had about 6 inches clearance, 3 inches on each side. And so once we rolled it in there, there was no way to get in it because you couldn't get the doors open. And then we put the truck back in the barn, and I don't know if we draped anything over the.
I don't think we had to.
No, we didn't have to. It just looked like the truck was parked right along the side the other grain trucks in the barn. Well, Lyle came out and went to the place where his Volkswagen used to be and looked all around, and it wasn't there. So he said, I can't figure out where my car has gone. And everybody was saying, well, are you sure you remember where you left it? Oh yes, I left it right there, parked in the barnyard. And we don't see it. Where could it possibly be? So then he started going around, and of course it wouldn't be in the farmhouse, so it could have been in the corn crib. So he went up and looked in the corn crib, and then it could have been in the granary, and he went up and looked in the granary, and I think, no, the granary was empty, so there wasn't any grain in there, but it was cleaned out, ready for the grain. It wasn't there. So then he went out in the barn and looked in the barn, all over the barn, and the only thing left was the chicken coop. And he knew it wouldn't fit in the chicken coop, so he couldn't figure out, and other than that, it's wide open fields.
And he had his keys.
And he had his keys. Nobody had taken his Volkswagen. So I guess, as I remember, the cousins had to give him clues as to where it could possibly be. And they said, you know, maybe
Warm or cold.
it's warm or cold, that's right. And if it's up the granary, no, that's cold. If it's down at the barn, oh, you're getting warmer. And then up in the hayloft, no, it couldn't be up there. But he looked in the hayloft, and then he came down and looked all over the barn and through the tool shed, and nothing there. And then people would say, well, you're getting warmer when you get over next to the grain trucks. And all there were was 3 or 4 grain trucks parked in a row. So he finally went around behind the grain trucks and walked along and looked in, and there was the rear end of his Volkswagen, and it was completely in the grain truck. It wasn't sticking out or anything, but he could see it. Well, then the problem was how to get in the Volkswagen, how to get it out of the grain truck. And of course everybody was just howling, well, Lyle, you must have parked it there last night. Did you run into Pullman and get a little drunk? You know, the college students do that down there all the time. And so everybody's laughing. So finally, I think we had to help him get the car out of the grain truck. We put the ramp back up, and then we have to push it in order to roll it down the ramp. But we thought that was the most creative joke that we had played on Lyle.
Yeah.